New times need new stories, new heroes, new virtues, tied to our mythic past but looking always ahead, towards the next turn of the weird. This is the new mythology. Hey, well met travelers. Thanks for stopping by. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back. This is the first episode in a new scripted series I'm calling The New Mythology. I'll be doing about one of these every month, and in between I'll try to do lower effort stuff to keep the great god algorithm appeased. Stay tuned for all of that. Now, The New Mythology is a project I've had percolating in my brain for a couple of years. It was born of the desire to provide a more inclusive and progressive narrative than we usually get on YouTube about the meaning of ancient mythology and virtue ethics for the modern world, especially where those topics overlap with fandom culture. Most of the content currently in this space is, to put it politely, reactionary. So today, in this video, I'm going to begin pushing back against all of that. This video explores the broader themes and framing that I'll be using going forward. Future videos in this series will focus on more granular looks at subjects like the nature of heroism, the ancient history of girl bosses, or whether Western civilization is even a thing. But I figure leading with an exploration of my broader theoretical framework will be useful as an introduction. So, here we go. Let me begin with a confession. I am one of those guys who thinks about the Roman Empire all the time. You may have heard of us. We were a meme last year.
There's this trend of all these women asking their boyfriends, husbands, how much they think about the Roman Empire, and I just thought this wasn't real.
No, men, I think, to our core, we're warriors. We have to be ready for battle at all times, and the Roman Empire is all about battle. Common sense.
What?
Roman Empire? More like Broman Empire, am I right, gentlemen? And look, I make no apologies for this. There was a lot of cool stuff going on during the Roman Empire, especially among all of the people who rightly opposed the Roman Empire. And not to get too #NotAllMen on you, but lately I have come to realize that the way I think about the Roman Empire and about the ancient Greeks and the Vikings and the Celts and all the rest of that Dungeons & Dragons stuff seems to be rather different from the ways that social media algorithms assume I think about the Roman Empire. Or rather, the way that social media algorithms are trying to make you think about the Roman Empire, and about the ancient Greeks, and the Vikings, and the Celts, and all the rest of that D&D stuff. Spend a little time on YouTube watching videos about Stoic philosophy, or virtue ethics, or Norse mythology, or, I don't know, the proto-indo-european language, and before long, the algo will start serving you up videos about the decline of masculinity in the West, or Disney forcing wokeness into Marvel properties, or Jordan Peterson crying about something. Probably one of those other things I just mentioned. And sometimes it just shows you straight up fascist propaganda. You see, the algo assumes that if you are a white man interested in ancient history or mythology, you must be a right-winger. To put it another way, the algo has created a link between modern right-wing political views on the one hand and interests around ancient history in the West on the other, and it funnels white male viewers interested in the latter down a tunnel full of the former. And this can leave viewers with the impression that being interested in stuff like ancient mythology or Stoic philosophy or virtue ethics or, I don't know, the proto-indo-european language requires them to become a right-winger. But it doesn't. Which is sort of what this video series I'm calling The New Mythology is going to be about. And speaking of ancient history, let me give you a specific example from the before time, in the long, long ago.
Where are all the good men gone?
Back when Disney was doing promotion for the first season of the MCU series Loki, they released this image of the Trickster God's TVA file, listing Loki's sex as fluid. And this, predictably, led to a whole lot of dingbats releasing YouTube screeds about how Marvel was once again shoving wokeness down our throats and trying to trans the kids while trashing the lore and insulting the true fans.
No self-awareness whatsoever. You know what I mean? No fucking self-awareness. They're just so obsessed with virtue signaling, they don't even understand
Saudi Arabian pride.
Exactly.
It's disgusting to me, definitely, when we talk about the whole, like, fucking, you know, the whole trans kid stuff. Like, the fact that people just so loosely talk about that subject, like that shit's fucking normal to basically castrate your fucking kid because he thinks he's a different gender is fucking insane, you know. But that's where we're at. And again, because they have basically weaponized what it is that they it's insane to talk about, like, hey, we're gonna grab these characters and their names and then we're just fucking not even gonna pay attention to this shit. And then these weirdos act as if there's something wrong with people. And this is what I was talking about in my show, like, what is yesterday, where they act like it's something wrong with someone who is a comic book reader that expects some sort of accuracy when they see the live action depiction. And these weirdos talk as if there's something wrong with you in the event that you see something and it crosses over, it's about to be adapted or into a live action, and you're like, that's not the character. It doesn't look like the character. It doesn't act like the character. And they're like, I hate that. Oh, well, it's a different universe. It's reimagined. It's a different universe. It's like, well, why the fuck are you using the character if we're not going to at least reference the source of material? What's the fucking point? These are people that have zero connection to this material, but they have stories, unfortunately, social agendas and preferences that they want to make sure they let the world know on, and they will, yes, run your favorite character into the ground.
And at the time, I had been reading a lot of Norse mythology, so I had to drop this meme in my head. Every time I logged on to read the discourse on Twitter, which was still called Twitter. Seriously, why are you still there?
Blubber, you fools!
And this discourse was J.K. Simmons as JJJ inducing, not only because the Marvel character Loki had been an established sex-changing shapeshifter in the comics for up to a decade by that point. And seriously, how else would a government bureaucracy trying to define such a being describe their sex anyway? Y'all did notice that the file said sex fluid, not gender fluid, right? Y'all do know that sex and gender are different things, right?
Right.
But also because the Norse god Loki had been established as a sex-changing shapeshifter for almost 1,000 years. And they aren't alone. There's a really fascinating story about Loki in the Poetic Edda, one of our main sources of knowledge on ancient Norse mythology and religion, where Loki confronts each of the gods of Asgard with some uncomfortable truth about themselves. The story, called Lokasenna, or Loki's Verbal Duel, takes the form of Loki entering a great feast in the hall of the sea god Aegir and trading verbal barbs with the other gods. After being kicked out of the feast for killing one of Aegir's servants, but we shan't mention that again here.
Yes, very sad. Anyway, it got me thinking.
Anyway, Loki returns to the hall, invokes the laws of hospitality to be granted a seat, and upon getting one, promptly begins verbally sniping at each of the attending gods. This becomes a contest of insults, in which Loki insults an Aesir, the targeted Aesir insults them back, and Loki then closes with a mic drop that shuts the Aesir up and requires the next god to step in and try their luck. Each mic drop moment is held by tradition to have revealed something embarrassing about that god to which they have no proper retort. And when Odin's turn at the mic comes around, we get this really interesting exchange.
You're mad, Loki. Out of your wits if you want to make Gefjon angry. I think she foresees the fates of all living things as well as I do.
Silence, Odin. You always judge battles unfairly for humans. You have often given defeat to the better side, when you shouldn't have.
You know, Even if I did judge unfairly and made the better side lose, I know that you, for 8 years, lived down on earth below, as a cow in milk, and as a woman. And you've given birth to children. I call that a pervert's way of living.
But people say that you practiced womanly magic on Samsoi, dressed as a woman. You lived as a witch among the humans, and I call that a pervert's way of living.
Now remember that this is a story in which the dramatic device is Loki epically owning each of the other gods by revealing some unspoken truth about them that either they'd prefer to keep hidden, or that reveals their hypocrisy in trying to cancel Loki. And then recall that this story is almost 1,000 years old, at least in its written form. As an oral tradition, it's likely to be far older than that. And here, in this tale, older than Disney, older than Marxism, older than DEI, older than the so-called West, we have a sex-changing shapeshifter revealing that a paragon of masculine kingship gained the magical wisdom that defines him by transing himself down on Midgard. There are obviously layers of nuance here around the subjects of gender identity and gender presentation that deserve a video of their own. A video I am probably not qualified to make, so I won't. The point I'm making with Locusena is that storytelling that defies the gender conventions we are familiar with today is nothing new. It's not the product of some recent cultural Marxist agenda to destroy masculinity. It doesn't come from a Disney cabal trying to trans all the kids. It's not the least bit woke, whatever that means. On the contrary, this tension between what we now call left-wing and right-wing, or what I would describe as between conformity and liberty, is as old as some of our most iconic epics of heroism and magic, arguably as old as storytelling itself. There's a case to be made here that Disney and Marvel, by canonizing their version of Loki as sex and or gender fluid, far from changing the lore to suit modern politics, is instead inching the character closer to their mythic roots. Gender-fluid Loki respects the lore, and the only political agenda Marvel changed the character to suit was the Comics Code Authority back in the 1960s, who did not look kindly on all this gender-fluid stuff. And all of the people on YouTube telling you otherwise are lying to you. And this example is also sort of what this video series is going to be about. One of the aspects of the Roman Empire that I think about all the time is how they were always finding their gods in other people's cultures, and then just attaching their gods' names to those other cultures' gods. This is part of the reason why so many people today think that the Roman pantheon is just the Greek pantheon with the names changed. They're not entirely wrong about that, but they do often get the transfer order reversed. The Romans were identifying cognates of their own gods everywhere they went, especially in Europe, not just among the Greeks. So they developed a habit of slapping a Roman name on a non-Roman god and calling it a day. And they often took it way further than that. One of the Romans' biggest big dick energy moves was to stage rituals in honor of an enemy city's gods during war, trying to lure those gods to switch sides. They would put on bigger rituals, make more expensive sacrifices, offer the enemy gods a place of honor in their own temples.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And of course, if they were victorious, as they often were, because these are the fucking Romans we're talking about, they would take this as evidence that the enemy gods had indeed switched sides and become Roman, and had thus earned Roman names. Now, a lot of this can be explained as rank imperialism, cultural appropriation, and psychological warfare by the ancient Romans. But I think we moderns often forget that the ancient Romans genuinely believed all this stuff. They of course recognized the pragmatic political value of what they were doing, but they did also sincerely believe that their gods were being reflected back at them in the gods of the people they conquered long before they conquered them. This is a story that galvanized them and legitimized their conquests, as imperial story cycles often do. After all, if the other culture's gods were already Roman anyway, why shouldn't the people be too? And the thing is, when you dig deeper past all the pragmatic political value and the self-aggrandizing stories they told themselves about their gods, it turns out the Romans were not entirely wrong about that. You see, the Romans were just one of many cultures in the lands we now call Eurasia, whose languages, mythologies, and religions evolved out of a much older culture and language that scholars call proto-indo-european, which is abbreviated as P.I.E. The P.I.E culture and language spread across Eurasia between 6,000 and 3,500 years ago. Scholars still debate the precise geographic origin of this people group, but the most popular opinion is that they came from the Pontic-Caspian steppe lands north of the Black Sea. They invented the spoked wheel and were among the first, if not actually the first, societies to domesticate the horse. Using these technologies, they were able to migrate far and wide across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, where they commingled, traded, conquered, and married into populations already living in those areas. Over time, the regional dialects of their language developed into the daughter language families we're more familiar with today: Baltic, Celtic, Germanic, Romantic, Sanskrit, Slavic, and so on. And it wasn't just languages they brought with them. They also brought a material culture and a mythological substrate that profoundly transformed the spiritual and ritual traditions of the lands they settled, a substrate that is in many ways still with us today. Being pre-literate, the P.I.E people left behind no written language. But modern scholars of linguistics and comparative mythology have been able to reconstruct much of their language through rigorous inductive research methods that I will not begin to understand. And with that language, they have also been able to tell us some pretty intriguing things about the P.I.E people's mythic and religious beliefs. Today, we are reasonably certain about the names of several of their gods, and of the broad outline of some of their core myths, which, it turns out, a lot of our modern stories still reflect. The best attested among these is a god whose name was Deus Piter, which means Sky Father. And no, those are not weird typos. The asterisk, subscript, and diacritical marks are all notations from linguistics that mean specific things to scholars. Anyway, the name of this Sky Father god transformed over time into the names of gods and heroes we are more familiar with. In ancient Greek, he became Zeus Pater, or just plain old Zeus. In Latin, he was Eupator, or Jupiter. In the Rig Veda, Hinduism's oldest wisdom text written in Sanskrit, his name is rendered as Dios Pitar. And there's good evidence that he became Tyr in Old Norse. And Julius Caesar tells us in his commentaries on the Gallic Wars that the Gauls claimed descent from a father deity called Dispater, though this may have been Caesar projecting his own religion into Gaulish beliefs. He was a fucking Roman after all. Kind of the type specimen of a fucking Roman.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Now I suppose you could be forgiven in assuming that the P.I.E Skyfather was the patriarchal ruler of his pantheon. But there's a good chance you'd be wrong, because even though he has cognates in many daughter pantheons, the roles of those cognates are by no means consistent. Zeus and Jupiter, of course, are the patriarchal kings of their godly families, wielding the awesome powers of lightning and thunder. But Tyr, his cognate in Norse myth, is neither the ruler nor the god of thunder. Instead, he's the god of justice. In the Rig Veda, Deus Pitar is, at best, a minor deity, not the ruler. He's the husband of Prithvi, and with her the primordial parent of the world. And we don't actually know what status the Gaulish Dispater held in his divine family. We just have to take Caesar's word for it that he was even a thing. It isn't just the Sky Father either. The reconstructed mythology of the proto-indo-Europeans is replete with gods, heroes, and story templates that confound efforts at universalization. Sure, there are similarities to work with, but inconsistency also abounds. Indeed, the most consistent thing about this ancient mythological brew seems to be its malleability. As two leading scholars of P.I.E. studies note,
what is meant by a war god may have actually included a number of different deities within the earlier system. In some cases, we may find the same individual under two different names, e.g. Sky Daughter and Dawn would appear to be the same deity. In other cases, a single deity from one of the Indo-European traditions may be included under a number of different headings, just as a screenwriter, when working from a literary source, will routinely collapse different characters into a single individual to have a manageable cast for his script. So also did the different Indo-European groups juggle with their deities to fill out sometimes multiple roles, e.g. the use of the sky god in Greece and Rome to fulfill the role of the thunder god, war god, and others.
Or, as the esteemed Oxford professor and translator of Frodo Baggins puts it,
speaking of the history of stories, and especially of fairy stories, we may say that the pot of soup, the cauldron of story, has always been boiling, and to it have continually been added new bits, dainty and undainty. It's an obvious point, and has been made before, but I venture to make it again, although it is a little beside my present purpose, for it is constantly neglected by those who concern themselves with the origins of tales.
Now, many people plumb the depths of this ancient mythological substrate looking for deep, timeless, universal truths about storytelling or morality or even human nature. They're convinced that ancient mythologies and philosophies hold the hidden keys to solving modern crises, whether they be masculine loneliness, woke Hollywood, or rampant moral degeneracy. Return to tradition, they say, while pointing at statues of Zeus, or the pages of the Bible, the writings of Marcus Aurelius, or the filmography of 1980s action cinema. And yet, when we look honestly at the deepest available roots of our own mythology, we still find fluidity, nuance, malleability. The foundation isn't rock solid. It's responsive to surrounding conditions. Everywhere they went, the P.I.E. people and their descendants reimagined their gods and heroes to conform to new climates and cultures, new political structures and modes of production, new religious insights and philosophical conclusions, even new generations of their own people. The lesson to draw here isn't that there's a lost wisdom or a hidden story formula awaiting us in the deep past if we could just chip away at the modernity that's accreted onto our traditions. The lesson is that it's change all the way down and all the way back. There are no exceptions. There never have been, anywhere or any time in the world. The only truly timeless, universal truth about storytelling is that the lore always adapts to external conditions of the storytellers. It's that all stories change. I'll say that again. All stories change. Don't get me wrong. I am not saying that there's no wisdom or truth in these ancient stories and philosophies. Quite the contrary. It would be foolish of me to argue that we should not seek knowledge of ourselves through ancient stories. All of our modern ideas about morality, spirituality, ethics, philosophy, gender, politics, even the woke ones, are rooted in these ancient stories. We, as a species, have been debating all of this stuff since the Paleolithic. The whole thesis of this video series is that there is value in engaging with modern mythological texts like comic books, movies, and video games, the way that ancient people engaged with epic poetry, theatrical drama, and the written word, as forms of wisdom text, as carriers of lessons about virtue, even sometimes as sources of spiritual experience. And that we should seek connections and threads between ancient and modern mythology to enhance that engagement. The problem is that today there is a pretty big cottage industry built around the claim that these ancient stories contain some kind of bedrock, timeless, universal truth about human nature that has been obscured by degenerate or misguided moderns. Whether this is a truth about gender roles, or the nature of the divine, or objective morality, the presumption that insights about it only come from an arbitrary selection of traditional sources, the older the better, is kind of bullshit. Because the more we zoom out on the picture of our mythological history, the more diversity and change we see. The history of the lore always changing with the times, all the way back to the beginning, is the grandest tradition of all. The one most deserving of celebration. The one tradition that's inherently worth returning to, because it reflects the only truly bedrock, timeless, universal human trait. Adaptability. The trait that ensures our survival, that makes us the heroes of the cosmic epic of evolution. As far as we know, we are the only storytelling animals. If there is anything truly essential to our natures, it's that we make meaning of our existence by telling stories. Our stories always reflect the selective pressures around us in some way. And because those pressures are always changing, our stories always change with them. They not only must change, but they should change. Because if the cosmic epic of evolution teaches us one thing, it's that stagnation is maladaptive. And fighting to make sure our stories don't evolve with us, that they don't change as needed to stay relevant to our concerns and survival pressures, rather than those of long-dead generations, is profoundly anti-human. The African-American lesbian science fiction author Octavia Butler wrote in her Earthseed novels that God is change. To my mind, there is no truer understanding of reality than that simple insight. And just as our ancestors sought the meaning of the divine and expressed their thoughts about the meaning of the divine through their stories, so can we. For if we fail to guide change, then change will guide us. And that version of the story too often ends in tragedy. But let me know what you think in the comments. Be sure to make all the proper offerings to the great god algorithm. And until next time, remember that what's best in life is to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and engage in discourse with the women. Hey, buddy. I'm trying to record something here.